Hi, I'm Brad Sipila. Pastor Mark earlier this week asked if I'd share my testimony with you this week, my journey coming to faith in Christ, and what God's been doing in my life since I've become a Christian about 5 years ago. I grew up in a small town with loving parents, very skeptical family, atheistic, not ever hearing the gospel growing up. But I quickly became kind of like a spiritual person and was always seeking different advice and different ways to flourish and live basically the best life possible. I almost became a Buddhist at one point in my life, really following the teachings of the Buddha and the Dalai Lama. Around that time when I was thinking this way, I met the Gales, Andrew and Diane Gale, and they invited me to church and into a Bible study. Took probably 3 years. Our first Bible study, I was looking at my notes there. We started in March 2013, and I didn't become a Christian until October 2015, so over 2.5 years. During that time, I started thinking about the cross and what is it that this man is doing on a cross, Jesus of Nazareth, and he's on a cross. Why is he suffering and dying for the sins of the world? Part of my thinking at that time was I was like, I was still following the Buddha and his teachings and loving both teachings, and then I'd be reading in the Bible Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. And then I'd wrestle with the idea of extinguishing desire and dissolve into oneness with nirvana. And then I would read Matthew 22:37-34. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus is clearly talking about a you and I relationship. And it just kind of started tweaking me more and more and more that there are legitimate desires in this world, and the desire to be with your family and to be with your wife and to be with your spouse or your kids and be with your friends and be with your neighbors ultimately. And then I would eject even more and say, well, miracles are impossible. They can't happen. And then I'm coming to this church, Stony Creek Baptist Church, and I see a presentation given about this beautiful 2-year-old girl who was born with missing parts of her brain. And the doctors couldn't explain it and labeled her a medical mystery. She's a fully functioning, awesome little girl, and I see you running around from time to time. And then my final objection, I would say, well, God, you don't answer all prayers. There's so much evil and suffering in this world. And I gotta say, this is the hardest question for anybody to answer, not just the Christian. And when it came to my atheism, and it solves the intellectual problem. You know what? There's too much pain. There's no such thing as God. So it solves that intellectual problem. But I noticed what it didn't solve, all the pain and suffering that's going on in the world. And then I heard a famous Christian scientist speaking on this very problem, and he talks about, granted, that's how this place is, that it's filled with barbed wire and brokenness. Is there any evidence anywhere that God has done something about it? And if Jesus is who he says he is, what's he doing on a cross? God isn't far from our pain and suffering, but he's come to be a part of it. So not too long after that, I was at church and there was a baptism service going on, and my wife, who's a non-believer, is sitting beside me, and she says, "Why don't you get baptized?" That is just the right push I needed to get this scared man, basically, to go and get baptized. I needed my unbelieving wife to tell me to go get baptized. If that doesn't prove the sovereignty of God, I don't know what will. So anyways, it was the best thing that I've ever done. And when you know who Christ is and what he's actually done, it changes everything, because all of a sudden you start seeing the world in a very different lens. And as G.K. Chesterton puts it, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. So thank you so much to the Gales, and thank you for all the people at Stony Creek that were building into my life and discipling into me and just speaking truth with loving and kindness, and just doing what you do. And just thank you to the Lord for opening my eyes. Now, I've also been asked, what has God been doing in the past 5 years in my life since I've become a Christian? And it's just been awesome to see one of my sons. He got baptized in June of 2019. Marcus, he became a believer then. And I've been faithful little prayer warriors, praying for me and my family. Little Osmo Gale, he's been praying for my wife especially, and all the prayer warriors at the church praying for our family. And I'm just pleased to announce that my wife has also committed herself to Christ and is now a believer in Christ. So just let her say, thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. God bless you, and take care.